What if I told you that Rome, the unstoppable empire, was almost wiped off the map, not by a rival kingdom, but by a tidal wave of migrating tribes? This wasn't a distant provincial squabble. This was a fight for survival on Italy's very doorstep. For over a decade, the Roman Republic was brought to its knees by a conflict that would shatter its armies, ignite mass panic, and ultimately reshape its destiny forever. This is the story of the Cimbrian War, a crisis so profound it nearly destroyed the Republic, and the revolutionary general who saved it. Our story begins not with a declaration of war, but with a desperate journey. Around 120 BC, a great migration began. The Cimbri, Teutons, and Ambrones, Germanic tribes from the chilly coasts of modern-day Denmark, were forced from their homes, possibly by catastrophic flooding. They packed up their entire world, families, livestock, everything, and headed south in search of a new place to live. After wandering across Europe, they arrived on the Danube River in 113 BC, in the territory of the Taurici, who happened to be allies of Rome. The Taurici panicked and called for help. Rome, ever confident, dispatched an army, expecting a swift and easy victory. They had no idea they were about to walk into a decade of pure disaster. Rome's first encounters with these northern tribes were a catastrophic mix of arrogance and incompetence. The Romans completely underestimated their new foes. These weren't disorganized barbarians. They were fierce, numerous, and desperate. In a shocking series of battles, Roman legions were not just defeated, they were annihilated. The most devastating of these was the Battle of Arausio in 105 BC. It was a bloodbath that dwarfed even the legendary disaster at Cannae against Hannibal. 2 entire Roman armies were wiped out in a single day, with casualties estimated in the tens of thousands. The road to Rome was wide open. A wave of raw panic, the terror Cimbricus, gripped the city. People were convinced the end was nigh, yet in a bizarre twist of fate, the tribes didn't invade. The Cimbri mysteriously turned west towards Spain, and the Teutons lingered in Gaul. This inexplicable decision bought Rome something more valuable than gold: time, and they would use that time to break every rule in their political book and pin their hopes on a single man. With its armies in ruins and its leadership disgraced, the Roman people cast aside tradition. They looked past the bickering aristocrats who had led them to disaster and turned to Gaius Marius, a new man, and the celebrated hero of the recent war in Africa. In an unprecedented and technically illegal move, they elected him consul 5 years in a row, granting him near-dictatorial power to solve this crisis. Marius knew he couldn't rely on what was left of the old army. He had to build a new one from scratch. He controversially ignored the long-standing property requirements for military service, recruiting thousands of poor, landless citizens into his legions, promising them pay, land, and a future. These weren't citizen soldiers anymore. They were professionals loyal to him. While the tribes were busy plundering Gaul and Spain for years, Marius took his raw recruits and subjected them to relentless, brutal training. He didn't rush them into battle. He drilled them, marched them, and forged them into a disciplined, cohesive fighting machine. He set up a base in southern Gaul, established an intelligence network, and patiently waited, transforming his army and, in the process, the very nature of Roman military power. The great storm finally turned towards Italy. In 102 BC, the Teutons and their allies marched south, their numbers so vast that it reportedly took them 6 full days just to pass Marius's fortified camp. They jeered at the Roman soldiers, shouting down from the road, asking if they had any messages they'd like passed on to their wives back in Rome. Marius refused to be provoked. He shadowed them, waiting for the perfect moment and the perfect battlefield. He found it near a place called Aquae Sextiae. Marius seized the high ground, creating a strong defensive position. He then cleverly sent a small detachment of his troops to occupy some wooded hills behind the enemy's expected line of advance. Just as he predicted, the overconfident tribes grew impatient and charged uphill. right into the Roman lines. As the brutal, grinding fight was underway, Marius gave the signal. His hidden force burst from the woods, crashing into the enemy's rear. Caught in a perfect pincer movement, the Teutonic host was trapped and systematically cut down. The victory was total. Their king was captured, and the first half of the northern threat was eliminated. But the war wasn't over. While Marius was dealing with the Teutons in Gaul, the Cimbri had successfully crossed the Alps and were now pouring into northern Italy. The other consul, Catulus, was outmaneuvered and forced to retreat, leaving the rich Po Valley open to plunder. Marius, fresh from his victory, raced his veteran legions across the Alps to link up with Catulus's demoralized army. In 101 BC, the combined Roman force met the Cimbri on the plains of Vercellae for the final, decisive confrontation. Under the blistering summer sun, Marius's highly disciplined legions proved unstoppable. Their training, their tactics, and their superior equipment overwhelmed the Cimbri. The battle was a complete slaughter. The Cimbri were virtually annihilated. Roman historians tell a grim tale of the Cimbri women who, facing capture and slavery, chose to kill their own children and then themselves. The northern nightmare was over. Marius was hailed as the savior of Rome, and celebrated as a third founder of the city after Romulus and Camillus. The Cimbrian War was a spectacular military victory, but its true legacy was the deep and permanent scars it left on the Roman Republic. The crisis, and the way Rome solved it, lit a fuse that would eventually lead to the Republic's destruction. First, the unprecedented power given to Marius created a new kind of political figure: the warlord, a general whose loyalty came from his soldiers, not the state. This set the stage for the intense and bitter rivalry between Marius and his ambitious lieutenant, Sulla, a conflict that would eventually explode into Rome's first major civil war. Second, to reward his troops, Marius took a revolutionary step. Without Senate approval, he granted Roman citizenship to his Italian allied soldiers, declaring that in the heat of battle, he couldn't tell the difference between a Roman and an ally. This act opened Pandora's box. It inspired other Italian allies to demand the same rights, and when the Senate refused, it led directly to the devastating social war. So, while Rome survived the Cimbrian War, it was forever changed. The crisis exposed deep cracks in its foundations, paving the way for the century of civil wars that would see the Republic die and the Empire rise from its ashes. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into Roman history fascinating, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.